Today I will show you a loathsomeness, secret film from 2009, named, Orphan, Watch Out and Fare Thee Well. Kate and her better half John stroll into an emergency clinic since she's in the process of giving birth. She moves wheeled away, as John remains behind to sign her in. Promptly, Kate begins dying. She awakens in a working room, encircled by clinical staff. The entire circumstance feels unusual and startling to her. When the medical caretaker tells her that her child is dead, Kate can barely handle it. John comes in and begins shooting the birth, as though everything seemed good. The medical caretaker gives her the baby. Kate is shouting and unexpectedly, she awakens in her bed. She gets up and goes to the bathroom, checking out the scar on her paunch. She takes a tablet. The following day, Kate is at psychotherapy, where Dr. Browning clarifies that bad dreams as those are an ordinary reaction to the injury of stillbirth. Kate contemplates whether the bad dream was regarding that or about the way that she will embrace a kid. Before long, she figures she probably won't be prepared. Kate lets her advisor know that she was thinking about getting some liquor, to which Browning answers that interestingly, she didn't accepting any whatsoever and, identifying with the reception, the advisor tells her that eventually she needs to choose if she will proceed with it. Kate goes to get her hard of hearing girl Max from school. She's driving her home, however when she moves from a stoplight occupied, she nearly purposes a mishap. Afterward, Kate is seen playing the piano and forming music. She gets bothered by some commotion she hears, so she heads outside and sees that Max is tossing a b-ball on the divider. She shouts at her to stop and the child apologizes. John shows up home with their child Daniel and them three mess about with the b-ball. That evening, Kate is taking care of Max, when she requests that she read her a story. The story is about the kid that kicked the bucket. Max inquires as to whether she'll get another sister. Before Kate hits the hay, she takes another tablet. She gets into bed with John and they talk about the reception. She's settled on her choice. They will proceed with it. Sometime later, they are seen jumping into a halfway house. Sister Abigail meets them forthright and advises them to glance around. Kate stays on the main floor, checking out the young ladies playing, and John goes to the subsequent floor. He hears a young lady sing and strolls inside the room, where Esther is painting. She recounts to him an astounding anecdote about the composition she's making, as Kate and Abigail stroll into the room. John presents them and them three keep on talking. The young lady says that no one has talked at any point ever to her before on the grounds that she's unique. They appear to like her. They converse with Abigail about taking on Esther. She lets them know that she was initially from Russia and that individuals who brought her to the US kicked the bucket in a house fire. Yet, with everything taken into account, Abigail feels that the young lady is brilliant. Kate concurs. After 3 weeks, they get her from the shelter and bid farewell to Abigail. In the vehicle, Kate shows Esther gesture-based communication. They arrive at the house and Max is eager to see them. Esther acquaints herself with her immediately, asking Kate the amount she can hear. That evening every one of them give her invite gifts, aside from Daniel, who as of now appears to be envious of the young lady. Daniel goes outside to the treehouse with his companions and they glance through filthy magazines. Esther and Max play in the snow, as Barbara and Kate talk about Max and about her arrangements to begin instructing again whenever Esther is settled. Barbara appears to feel baffled in Kate. There's a situation unfolding that evening, as Kate prepares to hit the sack. Esther awakens and goes to Max's room. John and Kate are having intercourse, when there's thump on the entryway and it's the two young ladies inquiring to rest in their bed. Esther needs to rest close to John. The following morning, they're all prepared to take off from the house and will school, when Esther comes down the steps in an extravagant dress, inciting different youngsters to giggle. Kate needs to ensure if Esther truly needs to wear that to school, and the young lady tells her that there is nothing out of sorts in being unique. Kate lets her wear the dress. Afterward, she is being invited in class by her instructor, when one of the children ridicules her. That day, Max and Esther play on the frozen lake, when Kate runs out, hollering that doing that isn't permitted. All the while, Daniel plays with a paintball firearm and fires a bird. Esther and Max stroll over and he's actual bombshell. However, Esther gives him a huge stone, telling him to finally give it some closure. He would not like to do it, so she does it for him. Afterward, Esther goes to wash up. Kate goes into her space to take care of her clothing, yet tracks down an old Bible trapped in a cabinet. She doesn't hear Esther watching out of the restroom as she glances through it and finds a photograph of a man inside. At school, Daniel's companions are ridiculing him due to Esther, so he pushes her books over. At the point when she goes to get them, a young lady from her group tracks down her Bible and as they battle for its purposes, it falls on the ground. Esther gets it, however the young lady goes after her choker, calling her a pup. Esther shouts. Afterward, Kate is helping her how to play the piano. Then, at that point, she gets some information about the episode at the school, however she would not like to discuss it. Kate gives her a scrapbook, which she has as of now began for her, when Esther inquires her with regards to the child she lost. Kate tells her what occurred, as she shows her the roses where they dispersed her remains. After supper, thinking the children are resting, Kate and John have intercourse in the kitchen. Esther abruptly shows up. The following morning, Kate goes to converse with her with regards to it. Esther appears undaunted as she paints, saying she thinks about it and utilization's the F word. Kate and John talk about it later and she figures they should take her to an advisor. John believes it's overcompensating to take the kid to treatment for one filthy word. John takes the young ladies to a recreation center and keeping in mind that they're at a swing, one of his neighbors comes over to play with him. In the interim, Esther's harasser comes into the jungle gym too. Esther's consideration is split among her and John's trade with the neighbor. The domineering jerk is really scared of Esther and pays special mind to her as she goes to play in the palace. She needs to go down a slide when Esther pushes her abruptly, breaking her leg. Max sees her do it. At cafe that evening, John converses with Esther about it. Max affirms the story that the young lady slipped. Before they eat, Esther supplicates and Max does likewise. She even comprehends communication via gestures better compared to Daniel. He threatens her and starts calling her names, when the guardians add. He runs off, irate and reviling. John puts a lock on his treehouse as a discipline. Afterward, Kate is at the store with the young ladies, when Sister Abigail calls her. Esther won't converse with her, however Kate proceeds. She moves to one side and tells Sister Abigail about all that has been going on, while Max pays close attention to her and relates her words to Esther. That evening, Esther plays the piano impeccably amazingly. She inquires as to why Esther professed not to realize how to play and the young lady answers that she did it for her advantage. That evening, Kate and John quarrel over Esther and their contention twisting's crazy. Esther hears them in the other room, satisfied. At some point, Sister Abigail approaches the house. She converses with the guardians about Esther, feeling that there may be some kind of problem with her. She records a couple of things that she may have done previously, such as harming different youngsters. The young lady hears everything and goes to get Max, telling her that she needs to help her so the mean woman doesn't remove her. Kate imagines that Abigail may be onto something, however John believes she's overcompensating. Kate recommends they take her to a specialist and he concurs. In the interim, Esther advises Max to discover the keys to the treehouse, yet rather she utilizes them to get a firearm out of John's protected. She removes the shots from the pistol, leaving one inside. She focuses it at Max, terrifying her frightfully. As Abigail goes out in her vehicle, Esther takes Max to an extension telling her that they will frighten her so much, she'll never need to return. As the vehicle draws near, she pushes Max onto the road and Abigail nearly hits the young lady, twirls and crashes the vehicle. Abigail discovers Max crying. When Esther hits her with a sledge, she trains Max to assist her with getting Abigail off the street. They roll her down. However, she's as yet alive, so Esther polishes her off with the mallet. Both of them go into the treehouse, where Esther conceals her ridiculous garments and the sledge. She lets Max know that they'll send her to imprison excessively only for aiding her. Esther then, at that point, tells her that she cherishes her. Daniel sees them move down the treehouse, yet Esther sees him as well. That evening, she comes into his room with a surgical blade, undermining him not to say anything. The kid pees himself. John and Kate take Esther to see Browning, who converses with them about her as she holds up outside. The advisor says that there is nothing bad about the young lady, however that Kate is indeed the issue. She thinks Kate feels deficient as a mother and is taking it out on Esther. John concurs with her thinking. At the point when they return home, Kate gets a call from the halfway house and she's informed that Sister Abigail hasn't returned since the earlier day. The police look for herself and discover her body where Esther left it. A cop is seen conversing with Kate and John, saying they have no suspects. Esther is in her room turning the light of her aquarium on and off, showing a grim painting she has made of the house and the family. Kate looks online for data about upset youngsters and shows her discoveries to John. He can't help contradicting her again and she lets him know she will not be seeing Dr. Browning any longer. Kate is stressed over what Esther's identity is and says she'll contact the halfway house in Russia, where Esther came from. At the point when she settles on the decision, she discovers that there are no records of her past to her appearance in the US. The following day, John goes to awaken Esther to take her to the dental specialist, yet since she doesn't have any desire to go he vows to reschedule. They go through the day painting together and Esther tells him that she feels that Kate doesn't like her. In the interim, Kate is taking different kids to school and gets some information about her. They lie, saying she's finished nothing off base. That evening, Esther comes in the kitchen telling Kate she has a present for her. She gives her a pail of roses, picked from where Kate's girls' remains were dispersed. Kate gets upset and gets her. However, John tells her it was his issue. That very evening, Esther goes to the carport and breaks her hand. Back in bed, she calls for John, letting him know her arm harms, and when he really looks at it, he sees it's been broken. They return from the specialist and he's wrapping her up their bed. When Kate comes in, he defies her, yet Kate says she didn't snatch her that hard. Afterward, she goes to an alcohol store and purchases 2 wine bottles. She becomes somewhat inebriated, however tosses the remainder of the open wine bottle down the channel. Kate drives the children to school the next morning. Daniel leaves the vehicle in his packed tears, so when Kate goes to help him, Esther puts the vehicle in drive with Max still in there. Kate pursues the vehicle until it's at long last halted by the snow. That evening, Dr. Browning is in their home and Kate swears that she put the vehicle in leave, also that Max is covering for Esther. John shows her the subsequent wine bottle which Esther found. The specialist tells her that she saved a spot for her in a restoration community. Be that as it may, Kate recounts to them her side of the tale about the wine. They don't trust her with regards to the wine and about the mishap. John believes she's being manipulative and allows her 7 days to follow a path toward full recovery or he'll leave and take the children. In the interim, Esther lets Max know that she'll shoot her mother in the event that she tells on her. Afterward, Daniel goes into Max's room and she enlightens him regarding Abigail and the treehouse. He says he'll get the stuff from the treehouse, yet Esther hears him. Kate gets up during the evening and slips into Max's room. Out of nowhere, Esther turns the light on. They go to and fro, yet Esther shows her the journal she'd been keeping, letting her realize she'd read it. She threatens her. However, Kate doesn't get bulldozed. The following day, Kate calls the halfway house again, and when she doesn't discover anything, she goes to get Esther's Bible. She thinks that it is concealed in an extravagant toy and discovers pictures of men inside. She sees the word Sarn Institute on it and promptly looks for what they mean. On the web, she calls the number she finds and they tell her that the institute is really mental clinic and not a shelter. In the meantime, Daniel escapes the house to get the stuff from the treehouse. Esther follows him there and begins pouring fuel, once again the proof. Then, at that point, lights it and keeps pouring fuel over Daniel. She locks him inside the consuming treehouse. He requires his mom. However, she's too bustling examining Esther. Daniel gets on the rooftop, sobbing for help. He falls onto a wooden pillar, yet slips and falls on the ground. As Esther watches him, abruptly, Kate sees the fire. As Esther goes over Daniel to kill him with a stone, Max drives her away and Kate shows up before she can do much else. Daniel is alive. They're all in the medical clinic. When the specialist comes in and educates them that he has a genuine neck injury and probably won't recall what occurred, Esther is stressed over that. Kate lets John know what she looked into Esther, yet he's as yet not persuaded. While they are contending, Esther goes to Daniel's room. Max knows what's happening and pursues her. Esther begins choking out Daniel with his cushion. As Max goes to get her folks, the alert in Daniel's room goes off and the specialists resuscitate him. Kate stands up to Esther and slaps her. Orderlies snatch her and steady her. She misses a significant call. Afterward, Kate awakens and quickly gets some information about Daniel. She asks John not to let Esther close to Max, as she remains for the time being in the emergency clinic. That evening, Max takes of her listening device and her father wraps her up. Esther comes in and snatches the guide when she says goodnight to her. John goes down to the family room and becomes inebriated. Esther strolls ground floor, spruced up like a grown-up, and sits close to John, who doesn't comprehend what's going on. Esther begins kissing him, however he draws back. He clarifies that he doesn't adore her the manner in which him and Kate love one another. John advises her to go to her room, yet she tells him not to converse with her like she's a kid. He says he will call the shelter tomorrow about her. Esther goes to her room and cries. In the meantime, Kate gets a call from a specialist in the Sarn Institute. He perceives Esther and advises her to get her family out of the house. Then, at that point, to call the police. He tells her that Esther is anything but a young lady, yet that she has some sort of chemical problem that makes her resemble a youngster. She is indeed a grown-up lady. Esther was one of the most over-the-top fierce patients in the clinic, and when she battled her limitations, they left scars on all fours. The specialist lets Kate know that she has killed somewhere around 7 individuals. Kate is hurrying to return home, befuddled how she could trick them. Back at the house, Esther wastes her room and eliminates every last bit of her makeup used to stow away the way that she's not a young lady. John goes to mind her and discovers her artistic creations all around the divider. Kate is calling him as she's driving home. However, the force goes out in the house previously he can get. She calls the police. John tracks down a light and glances through the house. When Esther cuts him, he's crippled, however alive, so she continues to cut him until she kills him. Max sees her and she pursues her next. Kate drives so quick toward the house that she collides with it and promptly goes higher up. She discovers John. Then, at that point, she understands Max is in a tough situation and attempts to discover her. She examines her room. However, when she doesn't discover her, goes into the restroom. Abruptly, Esther shoots her. Kate stows away in her room, yet luckily Esther doesn't discover her there. In light of the fact that she's hiding outside of the window, Max stows away in the nursery and Esther is coming for her there. As Kate sees her from the glass rooftop, Esther shoots after her once more. Then, at that point, discovers Max and shoots after her as well. Max escapes as Kate breaks the glass rooftop, falling on top of Esther. After a second, Max awakens Kate. She takes the weapon and gets her. Abandoning Esther, she ventures into the timberland. The police shows up and goes into the house, yet Esther isn't there. Abruptly she's pursuing Kate and Max with a blade. Both of them fall on the frozen lake and they battle. With Esther determinedly going after Kate, Max gets the weapon and shoots, loosening things up. The two of them fall inside and battle, until Kate weakens Esther. As she's slithering out, Esther gets her once more, imploring her not to let her bite the dust, but rather Kate kicks her back in the lake.